Hey friends, welcome back. I am Jason, and it is an absolutely nasty, miserable day outside, and I love it. Some of my favorite weather, and I apologize for the audio if that, you know what, I don't apologize. If you don't like the sound of rain on a tin roof, there's something wrong with you. It's not me, it's you, okay? Check yourself. We're discussing long-term survival here, guys, and I put out a poll last week, and it was basically along the lines of if you had all the gear that you needed, you could carry the biggest backpack that you could possibly carry and stuff it to the gills full of everything that you think you might need, all the equipment that you'd like to have, and you could go anywhere in the world, any survival wilderness destination of your choosing. There were four options. The first option was less than 24 hours, and only 3% of people said that's where they would fall. So there's only a small percentage, 3% of the people that voted, saying that they didn't have the confidence, the skills, whatever it would take to even make it one day. The next option was up to 1 week, and about a third of the voters chose that one, about 35%. The next option was up to 2 months, and about 28% of people said they can make it up to 2 months, 60 days in the wilderness with all the gear that they needed. One key detail was that you were by yourself. You did not have anybody with you. The last option was it sounds like absolute paradise, and I have no intentions of ever coming home. And a pretty big percentage of people chose that one. 33%, a third of voters said that they would never come home. It sounds like the perfect place to go. My question for the people that chose that one is, why aren't you doing it? What's stopping you? What's stopping you from loading up your backpack, heading off into a remote wilderness location of your choice? It wouldn't cost that much to get there, most likely, unless your remote wilderness location was some tropical island on this other side of the earth. I mean, what's stopping you from going there? That's my question for you guys. I'd like to talk about this and just give you kind of my feedback and what my point of view is on this subject, because I have a little bit of experience with longer term survival, being in a remote place with very minimal gear for a long period of time. So I feel like I can speak on this subject a little bit with a little bit of authority, and maybe you guys can learn a little bit from my experiences. First of all, you could pick any place in the world, a survival location of your choice. Where would you go? Me, personally, a tropical island of some sort with coconuts and fish and all the stuff, all of the sea creatures that I could gather in the tidal zones, I feel like would probably be your best bet for gathering food sources. But there's some complications, some dangers that come along with that as well. And the ocean is a dangerous place, man. I've spent a lot of time in the ocean. A lot of things want to eat you or sting you or bite you. The ocean itself just wants to drown you or freeze you to death or whatever. Maybe not in a tropical island, but you get the point. I've been stung by stingrays twice. I've been stung by a stingray twice on two separate occasions on the same foot in almost exactly the same location. And I will tell you, getting stung by a stingray is absolutely horrible. It is extremely painful. And then on top of that, one of the times my foot got extremely infected from the wound, from the barb stabbing in there, and they've got nasty bacteria all over their barb. And my foot got extremely infected. It looked like it swelled up so bad and turned red. It looked like my foot was trying to eat my toes, like an amoeba was engulfing my toes. It was so nasty. And without hardcore antibiotics, I would have either lost my foot, my leg, or I would have died. So if I was by myself in this tropical location of my choice, and I was all alone and I didn't have access to medical care of some sort, maybe I was prepared enough to bring antibiotics, that would be smart. That's maybe something that I would put in my backpack if I was going on this adventure. But without that, I probably would not have survived. So there's that. So where would I go? I've always had this fantasy of going to, this getting dropped off in Alaska on this remote small little pond somewhere in a float plane, just getting dropped off and leaving me there for a while. That would be a good time, I think. Not without its struggles, of course, there as well. But in this scenario, it was the springtime, so the weather was going to be fairly favorable. It'd be hard for me to not choose some sort of tropical warm place. Yeah, the bugs might be bad and stuff, but there's going to be a lot more resources for you, especially in a tidal zone. I mean, all the shellfish and fish, and I've caught octopuses. I've caught octopi with my bare hands. I've just grabbed them out of that tidal zone. You can pick them up and then you've got some chow there. It's not very tasty, but it is food. And then there's, just with simple rod and reel, man, you could do pretty well in a place like that. But let's talk about the less than 24 hours people. Pretty much anybody, no matter what, regardless of skill level, can survive 24 hours in any location pretty much if you are properly equipped. If you're dressed appropriately, if you've got if you're in a cold climate, if you've got a warm sleeping bag, if you've got some sort of shelter that you can assemble over top of your head, if you can get out of the elements, even if it's the nastiest place ever, if you're properly equipped, you can last 24 hours. I mean, you might get bored, but that's about it. So I think those people probably might have been kidding to some degree. The 3% of people that chose less than 24 hours have never been in a wilderness situation, probably. They lack the skills and therefore the confidence to survive in a place like that for any length of time. But pretty much any of us, even without proper equipment, if you're reasonably healthy and not injured, can last 24 hours pretty much anywhere. It's doable as long as you have the will to survive and you don't just lay down and die. In my experience, that first day, maybe two, you're kind of acclimating to your environment. You're learning the smells, the sights, the sounds, and you're kind of starting to become part of that environment in the first couple days. Now, there is something to the shock of being dropped off in a remote location, and it may sound magical, and it may sound like this paradise, this chance to get away from it all. But there's going to be a moment of shock where you're suddenly thrown into this wilderness location and you're alone. You are by yourself. How long have you been alone by yourself and you haven't had any interaction, you haven't been able to speak to or see any other human being? How long have you gone without that interaction with other people? Probably not very long, me included. The longest I've ever gone without seeing another person is probably, I don't know, I'd say around 72 hours, give or take. Something like that, three-ish days. And that's a long time. You start to get bored, you start to get lonely, you start to want to just talk to somebody and you want to share the experience with somebody else. It's great to go do these things and to test yourself and your skills, but man, it's so nice to share it with somebody else. It almost seems pointless. Maybe pointless isn't the word. It doesn't seem as fulfilling. It doesn't seem as valuable if you can't share that experience with somebody else. That's definitely a thing. So that first 24 hours might be an overwhelming shock for a lot of people that have never experienced the solitude, the quiet, how quiet a wild place can be sometimes, especially if it's in, the cooler months of the year. The silence can be overwhelming. But yeah, definitely that first 24 hours can be a little bit of an eye-opener and can freak some people out and possibly make them make some bad choices and end up getting them killed. The next group was people that thought they could make it up to a week. 35% of people said they could make it up to a week. And in that week's time, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go, let's say you brought some food, some rations, and you were able to start collecting some foodstuffs around you. It's still going to be significantly less than what you eat on a regular basis, if I had to guess. So you're going to be in a calorie deficit. Your body's going to start changing. Your body's going to start acclimating early on in those first 7 days. You're going to lose a few pounds for sure in those first 7 days. Most likely because your increased activity level, you're going to be gathering firewood, you're going to be fishing, you're going to be hunting, you're going to be doing all the things. So your increased activity level and the decreased calories is probably going to have a significant effect on you and your energy levels. You're not going to feel very good because your body's trying to catch up, to figure out what the heck you're doing to it and why it's in this predicament that it's in. So, but anybody can, if you've got water, even without food at all, anybody can last up to a week, no problem. You won't be happy, you'll be lethargic and you'll be hungry, but after about a week, your body's going to start getting used to those decreased calories. Now, 28% of people said that they'd make it up to 2 months, 60 days. That is a long time. The longest I've ever been out in a wilderness environment. I didn't have any equipment at all. I was there nearly a month in southern Louisiana in the swamps. I was there for almost a month with zero equipment other than the clothes on my back. So that's a little bit different, gathering food, and I didn't have any food other than the little bit of meat that was supplied to us at the very beginning that we had to preserve. So that's a little bit different scenario than this, but I can tell you that 1 month is really, really challenging in that situation. You're probably not going to be sleeping as well. You're going to start to get really, really lonely in that 1 month period for sure. People just need other people for the most part. There's this few weirdos out there that thrive off their solitude. But as a general rule, people need other people, and we need that interaction in order for us to be healthy. Otherwise, we start to lose it and we get depressed and sad, and everything starts to go downhill. But up to 2 months, I've never gone that long. I've never tried to do that before. Like I said before, a month is as long as I've ever tried to do. But 2 months would be really, really tough if you were lucky and you chose a really good location where you could reliably gather food. That would be huge. Oh man, that's a big one. And if you could gather in enough calories as far as fish or meat of some sort, kill bigger game, if you brought rifles and enough ammunition and traps and all the stuff that you could that you thought you might need in this location, and you were able to make that happen, then yeah, I think you could probably make it a couple months. I could make it a couple months in a location if I was properly equipped. I know I could. It would be really, really challenging, but I know I could do it. The biggest issue for me would be I just miss my family. I just get lonely. I don't want to talk to somebody. I want to share what I was doing with somebody else. I'd miss my wife. That would be the hardest part for me. I could keep myself busy and develop tasks for me to do each and every day, and finding the foods and setting up the trap lines and fishing and all that stuff would keep me occupied mentally, but it'd still be tough for me to go that long without other people. 33% of people said that they would just stay there forever. Man, that sounds like a dream. I just head off into the middle of nowhere, and that's all I need is my backpack. And I think that sounds romantic. It sounds like this fantasy dream that a lot of us have, especially us guys. I think that we want to head off into the wilderness and fend for ourselves and live off the land. But I'm telling you, try it. Go out there by yourself for an extended period of time. Go for a few days. Go for a week. And you'll see what I'm talking about. That longing for another human being is strong. And I think that you'll come to a rude awakening pretty quick, a lot faster than you think. And it sounds awesome, but man, without somebody to share it with, it's just a little bit empty. And then in addition to that, what about if you get hurt? Let's say you got all the medical supplies you need, but you break your leg. You're on your own. No one's going to fend for you. Who's going to go get the water? Who's going to run the trap line for you? Who's going to catch the fish? Who's going to gather the firewood? If you get really injured, get seriously hurt, if you tweak your back and you can't move without tremendous amounts of pain. Now that's something that needs to be considered. What if I got stung by the stingray on my foot and I was on my beautiful tropical island and my foot got extremely infected and I didn't have the proper meds to take care of it, and I couldn't solve that problem by myself? I would just lay there and die. It would be horrible. That would be, oh my gosh, that would be a horrible way to go. Oh my God, that would be infection take over your body. That would be rough. Even some of the most experienced, most respected frontiersmen in history, Daniel Boone, for example, those men spent weeks and months by themselves in remote locations, dangerous locations by themselves. And they said in their journals that it was a sad time. It wasn't enjoyable. They were doing it to provide for themselves and for their families, to bring furs back or whatever, and to make the money, or to do the job that they set out to do, whatever it was. But it wasn't enjoyable at all. And those men knew what they were doing. They grew up on the frontier and they had all the skills and all the equipment necessary. But it was not fun. It was not paradise. And they wanted to come back to civilization, back to their loved ones. What is some of the equipment that I would want to bring with me if I was on this challenge to head out into the wilderness location of my choice? And let's say I chose the tropical island. What would I bring with me? I'd bring a shotgun with as much ammo as I could possibly carry on my backpack. I would bring fishing rods and reels, lots of extra line, lots of hooks. I'd bring a bunch of lures, as many as I could fit into a tackle box that would fit in my bag. I would do a lot of research ahead of time to figure out which lures were the most successful, because I wouldn't want to count on being able to catch bait or get bait. A cast net would be really smart, so I could catch bait, catch small bait fish, or just fish to eat. If times were getting a little harder, a cast net is an effective tool for gathering small little fish. I've used those quite a bit. So I would bring that. I would bring the shotgun for birds and such that were flying overhead and roosting in the trees and whatnot. Whatever they would be, seagulls. Some sort of large gill net that I could set up in some sort of intertidal zone where there's currents coming and going, and I could catch some fish, some larger fish in a gill net. That's what I would bring. And with those supplies, and maybe some sort of spear gun, so I could dive with a mask and snorkel. I'd probably bring a mask and snorkel. So if I could fit all that stuff in my bag with all the normal stuff that we normally talk about, shelters, I'd make sure I had plenty of shelter. I'd have a solid tarp or two, probably two. I would have a hammock in a tropical environment where the weather was going to be warm. I'd have a solid fire starter that was going to last me forever. I'd have a big chunky ferro rod, maybe with some fat wood attached to it, like this guy. This big chunky ferro rod with the fat wood fire starter on here, this would be a go-to. But saltwater, you got to be careful. You get this in contact with salt water, this thing will erode away in no time at all. It'll be gone. So maybe this wouldn't be the best option. I don't know. A pack of 50 lighters, big lighters would be really smart. So I would bring cook pots and all the stuff that I would think that I would need, and hopefully I would pick a location with a fresh water supply so I could make that work. And I'd go from there. But yeah, food gathering supplies would be the number one thing on my mind. Like, what would get me the most calories? What's gonna catch the fish? What's gonna shoot the birds? What's gonna allow me to keep going on? And then you got to think about, but this backpack that you're carrying, one of the requirements was you had to be able to carry on your back. And this pack could get bigger and bigger and bigger and heavier and heavier and heavier the more stuff you think about. You'd have to make some compromises. I'd want to bring all the shotgun ammo and stuff that I could bring, but I mean, how much could you actually carry on your back? This stuff gets pretty heavy pretty fast. And then you want to talk about maintenance in a salty environment, a tropical environment like that. A gun will rust up pretty quick if you don't bring ways to maintain it, some sort of oils and stuff like that to make that happen. But anyway, that's some of the things that are on my mind. I'd be thinking about food production, because my time that I spent in the southern Louisiana swamps, food was always just out of reach. Even with no equipment, no supplies at all, I was able to get fire successfully. I mean we were able to get fire and keep fire for a solid month. We started one fire and we kept that one fire going the entire time. We were able to make shelter. We were properly clothed, so we were sheltered from the elements in that sense. Water was pretty much everywhere. Finding clean water was the challenge in that location, but the location of my choice, I would have a fresh flowing spring coming out of the ground if I could find it. But food was the tough one, man. It's really hard to get food in a remote location, and the pristine wilderness doesn't always have as much food as you think it does. It's not like there's just game everywhere running around like the parks have them. It's not like Yellowstone, where there's just animals everywhere that you could shoot and kill. It's not like that in most places. Those animals are there because they're protected. Most other places, most other wilderness environments, it's not like that. The animals are much farther and fewer and much more spread out and much more wary of humans. And then once you've occupied an area for a little while and you start spooking all the animals around you, they're going to be onto you and they're going to start moving away. You put hunting pressure on animals and they're going to figure that out pretty soon. The birds are going to stop roosting in the tree overhead if you keep shooting them. So the deer are going to wander off to safer places if you keep going after them. I think I've rambled on enough. I really appreciate you watching. I really like these type of discussions where we talk about real life survival versus fantasy land. And I think that the more we can discuss these things, the more we can be prepared for possible events that might happen in our future. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I cannot wait to see you on the next one. I'm Jason Salyer with Survival Dispatch. As a Survival Dispatch insider, you'll be able to gain the knowledge, the skills, and equipment necessary to protect your family when it really, really matters. They'll provide crucial information on such things as stockpiling food, medical necessities, communication plans. You will receive specific, actionable plans. You can deliver proven techniques to help you get home, shelter in place, or bug out safe.